All right, so we are recording now. Welcome, my name is Jenine Kotob. I am a practicing architect in the DC metropolitan area. I'm also chair and co-founder of the Northern Virginia Chapter's Committee on Architecture for Education. I'd like to welcome you all today to the Landscapes of Learning webinar, a virtual exploration and panel discussion on the Heights building in Arlington, Virginia. Before we get into it, I want to share a little bit about our committee. The CAE is a national knowledge community with the American Institute of Architects. We are a group that is concerned with the quality and design of all types of educational, cultural, and recreational facilities. The CAE is a forum for architects, educators, and civic leaders that promotes the exchange of ideas, best practices, and resources around learning environments design. You can learn more about our chapter's CAE on the AIA Northern Virginia website. So today's panel discussion has been over a year in the making. Before COVID hit, we had plans for an in-person tour of the exciting facility designed by Bjarke Ingels Group and A Daly for Arlington Public Schools. The local architecture community was all abuzz when they heard about the new facility and its one-of-a-kind design. However, in the absence of in-person events, we have been committed to creating an online virtual experience. We created a virtual tour that would allow individuals to celebrate the new facility. We hope that you've had some time before this event to poke around on the site and check out the building. The site was created by our amazing Northern Virginia chapter volunteers, and even after today, you'll be able to stay engaged on our site, and we may even add more virtual tours to other buildings and urban projects as time goes on. We will be pasting the link into the chat for the site, so please make sure to check it out in your free time. So for us, the silver lining as a community for an event like this is that our online event programming has allowed us to connect with professionals from all over the country. We're really excited to see that over 300 people registered for today's event, and we're really curious to know where everyone's from and what you do. So drop a quick hello in the chat with your location, your occupation. If this was an in-person event, we'd all be getting to know one another, exchanging business cards. I don't really think we'll be doing much of that in the future, but who knows? So we'd really like to encourage you to use the chat feature as much as possible. Stay engaged with the conversation. All right, so on to the next slide. Okay, so I'd like to introduce our powerhouse panel for today. We have representatives from BIG, A Daly, Arlington Public Schools, Silman Engineering, and Gilbane. You'll hear from all of these individuals after we share a video on the project and listen to a presentation by BIG. Stay engaged throughout the presentation online. Use the hashtags that are listed here, hashtag learning landscapes, hashtag the Heights building. You can also tag us on Instagram. That's our handle that you see there, and email us if you have any questions to the email that's listed there as well. As Ria mentioned earlier, if you have questions throughout today's discussion, please use the question feature below to ask your questions. They could get lost in the chat box. All right, with that, let's head over to the video. Thank you.
The new site of the Heights building is in Sundlin, which is a much more densely built neighborhood. And because of that, it required us to think about designing a building that vertically fit all the program and also minimize the footprint to allow for as much open space for the children to utilize as possible.
It's a relatively small site. So very early on, we started to explore ideas where we essentially expanded the outdoor space to occupy the roofscape of the building. So the idea of the fanning bars that eventually became the concept really came from the idea of maximizing the amount of outdoor space. The initial thinking was, how can we essentially take a quite ordinary classroom bar that is usually stacked on top of each other, and essentially how can we change that relationship between the different floors? So we literally were sitting with a bar and a few boxes representing the gym and the auditorium, and we took the stack of bars in our hand and essentially we just fanned them out, and we realized by doing this move you actually break down each floor to a one-story structure with adjacent outdoor space, and then under all the fanning bars you create this public space where you can fit all the communal program out the building. My favorite part, I think, is really the cascading stair. I think it's quite incredible how the design of the kind of fanning bars allows for the students to see each other as you're walking up and down the building, and by doing so have the opportunity to actually engage and see what other classes and students are up to. A lot of the things that later on became a part of the concept DNA, if you like the cascading stair, came from comments that the students had about not having enough spaces to meet each other, not having enough spaces to collaborate and essentially hang out together.
You know, community is so important, and like, how are we going to make sure that the design that was so different from like where we had come from and what we were so comfortable and happy with, like how the design would be able to facilitate that kind of community, and knowing that it was a challenging site to build on, right? That it was going to have to be a more vertical school. There's a lot of like little spaces all around the building, and you know, I could see over time like those spaces being used for kids to do more independent work or to work in small groups in these sort of like corners of the building.
For me, the Wilson Blower lobby is the most exciting space because you get to understand the building massing and how it functions as an urban school very well. I mean, when you're in there, you get to understand and you get to see all these different quality of spaces and how they communicate each other. So when you're in the classrooms, you can look down and you can see how students are using the social stairs. You can also look down into the gym. There's a lot of different activities happening all at once, and that's the public space, which is the most exciting space for me.
I think the most challenging aspect was balancing the program requirements with the budget, as well as with trying to do something that was novel, that met the needs of the HB Woodlawn program. It's a collegiate style education format where students are given a lot of latitude and self-direction, and making a building that responded to that degree of autonomy was difficult because you couldn't necessarily rely on your previous experience of education programs. And I think it was challenging, but it was also very rewarding because rather than relying on typologies that are well worn, we were actually having to invent new ideas. And I think that's probably also where we had our greatest success, as well as it being our greatest challenge.
Awesome, thank you so much. Now we're going to pass it on to our big team that are going to give a quick presentation.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Just gonna see if everything's working.
We can hear you.
Great, thank you. My name is Daniel Sundlin. I am a partner in charge and an architect in Bjarke Ingels Group, and I've been involved in this project since 2014, when we got invited by the APS, Arlington Public Schools, to design a new school for 2 different programs, for the H.B. Woodlawn program that is focused on trust and self-governance, but also the Eunice Kennedy Shriver program for children with special educational needs. Kind of the initial, sorry, there might be a little bit repetition here from the video, but I'm going to be very brief. The initial kind of process was really about bringing these 2 programs together in a 180,000 square feet building for 775 students. So we essentially spend a lot of time together with the students, the teachers, the Arlington community, and the APS leadership. So here's just some screenshots of the process. So not only the intent with this school was to serve the community, but for us it was really important that the community and the users were heavily involved in the decision-making and the design process. So a big part of that, the outcome of that process was to understand the relationship between the different program components and how the building would be used. So this was kind of the initial brief, if you will. And then we explored a lot of different opportunities. Our design process in one way is very much about exploring and exhausting opportunities to make sure that we end up with the right strategy to move forward. So throughout all these different ideas, we ended up with, or actually I believe it was voted as the favorite option by everyone involved, and it was referred to as the fanning bars. So as mentioned in the video, the idea was really to think about this kind of small urban footprint and think about how we can expand the outdoor space and create more quality spaces indoors as well as outdoors. So you can see how we kind of fan the program or the classroom bars to create this kind of cascading terrace scape. And then under it, we place all the bigger program spaces, the shared learning spaces. And then together, it becomes this kind of learning landscape, if you will, both on the outside and on the inside. And this is an image from the construction. It started in 2017 and kind of concluded in the end of 2019. And you can see the kind of the amount of coordination required to bring this vision to life was really exceptional. And this is kind of one of my favorite moments where you really see how everything comes together. And in this vertical stack, if you will, is also where you have the core of the building. So this is just kind of a few views showing how the different spaces are used throughout the building. And I think one thing that was really a driving force was this idea of just creating informal connections throughout. So a lot of the, as you can see, there is a lot of transparency, and we also use color to kind of code the different programs. And each level have a different color coding as well. So you easily kind of recognize where you are. And then one of my favorite moments is really this diagonal stair, which also means that you get this kind of unique view throughout the entire building. Normally, the stairs in schools are just spiraling on top of each other, which means that you don't really get that kind of three-dimensional connections. And here you can see the terraces where we really thought about each terrace as a different learning opportunity. And here you can see this kind of sloping lawns where we envision that you can have different learning opportunities. And once again, just looking at how everything comes together. And you can see some evidence of those, that color coding of the circulation spaces. And then, of course, also from the urban side, from Wilson Boulevard, you can really see how the building opens up, and you have the kind of central atrium that really connects everything together. Yeah, that was the last slide I had to show. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. So now we're going to switch into the panel discussion. If all of our panelists could please turn their cameras on and their microphones on. Hi, everybody. All right. Are we missing anyone? I feel like we're such a big group and I can't keep track. It's like a class. We've got all the little kids, right? No. So before we get into it, I want to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves. And I'm going to go through what I see on my screen. So I'm going to start with Tony. You're first on my list.
Thanks. My name is Tony Shiber. I am a senior architect at BIG, and I was a project architect for the Heights building.
Thank you. All right, Daniel. We just heard from you, but go ahead.
No, I'm happy to present again. My name is Daniel Sundlin. I am a partner in charge for the Wilson School, the Heights School, and I'm an architect by training and representing Bjarke Ingels Group.
Thank you. Aran?
Aran Coakley at BIG. I'm an associate here as well as a project manager for the Heights building.
Thank you. Andrew?
Andrew Graham. I'm a senior architect with Leo A. Daly in Washington, D.C., and I led the architectural team for Leo Daly during the project.
Thanks. Dr. Casey?
Hi, I'm Casey Robinson. I am the principal at HB Woodlawn and have been working with the group at BIG and Leo A. Daly since, I guess, 2014, which feels like a long time ago.
Thank you. Jason?
I am Jason Myers with Silman. I'm an associate there. I was the project manager and led the design of the school all the way through construction.
Last but not least, Tyler?
Hey everyone, Tyler Swartzwelder with Gilbane Building Company out of our DC office. I was the executive in charge of the project for Gilbane, really from pre-construction at SDs clear through the completion of the job.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. So, we decided to call this presentation Landscapes of Learning. And, that can be somewhat of an esoteric title, but, I want to turn this over to the BIG team to maybe, explain to us what is a landscape of learning? Are we looking at perhaps a new typology, a new kind of example for schools of the future? If you could talk about that.
Sure. Maybe I can start, and Daniel and Aran can chime in afterward. But as Daniel kind of touched on, one of the biggest challenges of the site was to maximize the amount of open space that was accessible to the students, to the teachers, to the classrooms in a very kind of constrained urban environment. So the generative concept of the design was really this fanning of the individual classroom bar tiers in order to create this outdoor space. And the outdoor space, not only is it kind of directly adjacent to a lot of the interior program, the interior classrooms, but it's also activated very uniquely as one progresses from level to level to create, a lot of dynamic spaces, different scales of spaces for larger or smaller, more intimate gatherings, even learning spaces such as the potential for urban gardening. And then the kind of final kind of connective tissue that Daniel mentioned was the cascading stair, which not only unifies and connects all of the interior programming, but also unifies and connects all of the exterior terrace programming. So really creating this kind of dynamic and pseudo kind of playful space that kind of blurs the line between indoor and outdoor classroom and teaching environments.
Great.
And I think what we discovered when working with the school was that the learning environment isn't just the classroom. It's also this in-between space that occupies a lot of buildings. Like a corridor could just be seen as like a throughway through a space, but what we tried to do is make these public spaces also opportunities where students can collaborate and work on their own outside of the classroom. And so that idea of the connecting stair that goes through the building, the entry with these terraces where students can gather and speak with each other. And then of course the terraces on the roof, not just an activity space for students to run through, but also a space where students can study on their own or study in a group. So really changing the opportunity of how you learn. It's not just a classroom, it's much more diffuse. And I think everyone can see that with how COVID has affected learning, but it's not, a classroom is only a component of the school. And I think the HB Woodlawn program is a great example of their instruction isn't just limited to the classroom. It's a much wider environment. And that's why it is a landscape of learning, the whole campus.
Yeah, and that's a perfect transition to Dr. Casey. You know, really a project like this is only possible because of the progressive and, you know, fascinating educational philosophy that, you know, you guys have in your school, but also Arlington Public Schools more broadly. So if you could kind of touch a little bit on the specific educational philosophy in your unique programs and how they kind of became an impetus for this design, and maybe even vice versa. Do you see yourself also, you know, being inspired by the building and approaching education differently?
Yeah. So just in terms of like from the first side of things, I do think that APS knew that they had a really challenging site. Initially, they were, I think, Big put in a proposal to build a 1,300 seat school on this site, and we're about 775, and it was really you know, an impressive architectural proposal in terms of what could fit on such a small site. And I think that APS, I'm not an architect, but our head of facilities and operations is an architect by training. And I think he was really captivated by the idea of using the space in a different way. And I think that he was really instrumental in getting the school board on board with that, which, and I think throughout this process, and Tony and Aran and others could probably speak to it, it was kind of a constant back and forth between being, you know, they were building for a public school system versus a private school or another private entity. And so there were really significant budget constraints. So there was sort of like what we wanted versus what we could have. So I do think there was some vision there from like the central office in terms of what was possible with this site. Once we ended up meeting and working with the architects, you know, I think I mentioned this earlier, you know, we didn't, our programs did not want to move to a new facility. And so it was really a process of having the Big team and Leo Daly kind of help us envision what was possible in this new site, and that it was not all about loss, that there was going to be things that would be gained. And so, you know, we've only had students in the building for about 6 months. So in terms of like all that will be possible here, I don't know that we've necessarily know that, but I do think that the architecture team and the, you know, and Tyler, in terms of like actually making it happen, you know, made the most of the site that we have. And so, you know, in terms of having outdoor space in a place where, you know, we were used to being on like a 10-acre campus, and now we were on, you know, a little square. And so the terraces are, you know, I think one of the things that has some of the most potential. So I'll stop there, and I'm sure there are questions too.
That's great. You know, and hearing you talk about the site, I really want to talk with Andrew. And if you could talk a little bit about the challenges with an urban site, you know, as we become more urbanized as a society and our schools go more vertical, talk about the challenges there with the small footprint, maybe the approval process. Like, what was it like dealing with such a small site and such a large program?
So there's a few layers of complexity to a project like this, specifically dealing with the site and the approvals process. So the first layer of issues, I think, are really the physical issues that we've talked about. And, you know, the site is tiny. The design of the school, there's no back door. Every you know, entrance around the school is somewhat of a front to pedestrian access. When you go below grade, we've really built out the entire site 100%. So when it gets to things like utilities and requirements for just making a school operate, like just utilities and easements and things like that, the gas line, Dominion Electric Power, all of these things that are infrastructure for the project, they get pushed out. So many of these were pushed out into public space, and there was a trickle-on effect of approvals and the processes required for those. The next layer is coordinating with the neighborhood, and by that I mean the surrounding neighbors and sites. And there are 5 lots that are all tied together, and they were a part of the West Roslyn area plan. And this goes back to 2014 and 2015, and the vision that zoning and the community had for the project. And each of the neighbors, there's some type of coordination aspect that our team had to engage in with each of the neighbors. So next door, we had the Roslyn Highlands Park and the Penzance site. We had to coordinate directly with them to make sure that park worked with our design and vice versa. There's an existing fire station, which became a temporary fire station on our site. There's a project to the north, Queens Court Apartments. They're not directly related, but civil infrastructure was shared with our project, so we had to coordinate closely with them. And then, of course, there's the adjacent 7-Eleven and another condominium that's directly to the north. We had to also coordinate construction with them. So a typical project, you might not have to coordinate with every single neighbor around you. And then lastly, the zoning requirements for the project were very in-depth. We submitted a use permit, which is a special zoning application process in Arlington County, and it's very in-depth. There's a high level scrutiny, and many agencies that we work directly with and have a say in pretty much all aspects of the public side of the design. We had something like 66 conditions that we had to comply with and work into.
Wow, amazing. The other interesting part of this project is the structural challenges involved. I mean, it's such a unique building, doesn't fit in a typical, double loaded corridor layout. So Jason, maybe you could talk a bit about the structural challenges. How are you able to still maintain the architectural vision, but, do the structural design for the project?
Yes, so the vision of the fan bars created a unique condition of floating corners on the northeast corner of the building. So the challenge was to find a way to support those corners that respected the program and the architecture. So we looked at several concepts, from simple cantilevered beams with a forest of columns, to trusses on the sides of the building, to helical columns, and ultimately to what we called the floating buttress concept. And the helical column concept, while it was beautiful in elegance and simplicity, it really ate up some interior program. And that program couldn't be lost. So what we did was we pushed those helical columns out to the walls and then added framing at the ends of the walls that became the floating buttresses. Once that was done, a global twist and lean was created to the building, and we resolved that by tying everything back to the concrete core. So the concrete core where the elevators and the stairs are located really holds up that whole corner of the building. It is a very unique structural design, and it was very successful for this project.
It's really fascinating. And, Tyler, as you came on, I'm sure you were learning about the structural design and thinking, oh my God, that's going to be a lot of money. Talk about kind of your role on the project and some of the greatest challenges as the GC for the job.
Yeah, so for Gilbane, obviously in general, as we came on board around SDs, we knew that the vision was something simply remarkable, right? And it was going to take some really creative approaches to construction that maybe we potentially hadn't seen before or hadn't taken on. So our challenge to ourselves internally was always push ourselves and our subcontractors out of our comfort zone, right? Get away from what we thought was a traditional approach to building and make sure that our challenges that we saw would never compromise the design intent, right? So I think you've probably heard it throughout, all the speakers, but, the biggest challenge we have when you're looking at this structure and thinking how you're putting it together is with the landlocked site that we had and the structural erection sequencing that was, constrained like it was, we're landlocked on all sides, and we had one small piece of land on the what's actually the north side for all of our deliveries, all of our cranes, et cetera. So, this isn't unusual for an urban building. It's not an unusual challenge, but it just so happened that that area was at the furthest point from most of our heaviest members, right? It was at the point as the building was cascading away from us, as Daniel said earlier. So, crane size, capacity, quantity of cranes, sizing of specific steel members. I mean, we were back in between SDs and DDs talking with Jason and his team about how we were going to put these members together, plate girders or trusses, et cetera, just to make sure that we had that plan prior to bidding. We wanted to make sure we didn't have any surprises for our client prior to GMP. So, at the end of the day, the partnership we created early on with the design team helped us work through some of these challenges, specifically the structural erection and sequencing, prior to the GMP for our client. So,
awesome, thank you. So I want to kind of touch on something that Andrew mentioned earlier, and maybe someone from the big team can answer this, but talk about the engagement process with APS and kind of the broader neighborhood. We know things like equity are really important. We need to make sure that we're addressing the needs of all so that every faculty, student, teacher can thrive. But also we want to take into consideration the community's thoughts. So can someone kind of talk a little bit about that?
I can maybe start on this one again. So as I'm sure Casey can attest to, there was a quite significant public process for which Daniel showed a few images. And we worked with the BD+C, we worked with the students, the teachers, a lot of the Arlington neighbors to really kind of make sure that the design approach, we kind of walked everyone kind of through the design approach, that the building was incorporating the programmatic elements that were required by the two different unique programs, and that everyone kind of had a say in how the design evolved. I think one other kind of critical element to the whole process was the challenge that we were given to reinvent or reinterpret Arlington Public Schools educational specification, and that was really a very collaborative process from at the start of schematic design, maybe even earlier than schematic design, during which we conducted a series of departmental meetings with all of the different departments through HB Woodlawn, through the Stratford program at that point, which has now become the Eunice Kennedy Shriver program, and really understood the complexity of the spaces, the overlap, the adjacencies that were required between the two programs, the unique components of the individual programs, and then ultimately what was critical to get the space to function accurately in terms of size, et cetera. So that whole process was I think a really successful one, because by the end of it, we had essentially recreated a new educational specification document that really honed in on exactly what the needs were for the HB Woodlawn and the Eunice Kennedy Shriver program.
Great. I'm kind of following the questions in the chat, and some of them are questions that I think we want to definitely talk about. One, around the sustainability goals for this project. This is obviously a very green project, and maybe Andrew, if you could talk a little bit about some of those sustainability goals and measures, and how, I don't know if you guys have followed up with the building to see how it's doing. I mean, I know it's COVID right now, so there's probably no one there, but if you could talk a little bit about that.
So the building is designed for LEED Gold version 2009, and there's a few of the goals that we went through during LEED that I think are worth discussing and pointing out. One is that the site was a contaminated site when we started the project. So there were petroleum tanks or remnants of petroleum tanks on one portion of the site. So we actually had to go through brownfield remediation to comply with LEED and also to comply with zoning requirements. So that's, I think, very unique. That's not going to happen on every LEED Gold project that you encounter. So we had an extensive investigation into not only the site, but what we needed to do with our below grade details, as well as our other systems that operated below grade. Additionally, efficient water use was a goal for the site. So we collect all rainwater from the terraces, and that goes to a day tank and a cistern, and that water is reused for flushing of toilets and for the cooling tower. So that's also unique that you don't necessarily see on every LEED Gold project. Quality of the indoor environment was very important, this being a school, and specifically some unique ways that we achieve that. We have quite a few specialized acoustic assemblies throughout the building, especially around the performing arts spaces. So we have the 400-seat auditorium. Above that, in order to separate that from rehearsal spaces and band spaces, we have a double layer concrete floor slab for acoustical isolation. So that's unique. And there's a few other areas where we have upgraded acoustics throughout the building. And lastly, with LEED, we got an extra point for something called a green building education program that was, we planned the building around. And so the example that we used was with the terraces. So the 4 terraces, they incorporate regional ecosystems into each terrace. So each terrace, being 4 different ones, represents coastal plains, the Piedmont region, the Valley region, and then the Blue Ridge region. So that was the inspiration for these terraces. And that's, that's a way that students can start to learn about the ecosystems in the region. Lastly, this is considered a high performance envelope and a high performing building. We're 30% better than ASHRAE 90.1, which is pretty incredible. That's achieved through LED lighting throughout the building, which is becoming more common. The HVAC system is incredibly efficient. It's a VRF, or variable refrigerant flow system, with DOAS units. And then the actual building envelope really does a lot of the work as well. We have 7 inches of mineral wool incorporated into our glazed brick system, which is the white opaque wall assembly that you see. So really, it really is high performing.
Awesome. And hearing you talking about the learning opportunities, Dr. Casey, I wanted to kind of see, are there any inspirations you can take from the building that you would like to incorporate into the learning? We often say the building could be a teaching tool or is a third teacher. And with all these new sustainable features, do you guys see yourselves incorporating that into your education in a formal way?
I think there's a lot of informal learning that's happening in terms of the sustainability. Like, this is a little bit different in just that we've only been here 6 months, and the first month or 2 was we were just moving in. But I mean, certainly there are a lot of opportunities. Certainly, one of our very first opportunities was in the first weeks of school. Kids wanted to know why the water in the toilets was a different color. And, we were able to have our biology and environmental science teachers put things together to sort of say, here's how rainwater collection is happening and how we're reusing it and why that's important. So I think as things come up, certainly we're also, I'm sure as we, spend more time in this building, we'll be using sort of the terraces. There's a lot of ideas for how we can use it for gardening and other sort of sustainable things. We've gotten some grants along those lines. In terms of inspiration from the building, yeah, I think as we settle into it, and we've learned a lot even just in the short time of what we need in order to make spaces friendly to students. It was funny to see sort of where they congregated was not necessarily places that we thought they would congregate. There's the very bottom of the stairwell, the yellow stairwell, which goes nowhere, but it became a hangout for kids almost immediately. So then it was sort of oh, do we put furniture down here and make this an actual thing? Or and then again with the big central stairs, we only were able to have one dance here, but the kids totally re-envisioned how to use those stairs and put all kind had it all decorated, so I know that's not necessarily an educational, but just in terms of how kids have a different vision of how to use space as well. And so even in just the few months we were here, I think like they are sort of figuring out like what spaces are going to be sort of serve what function for them.
It's really nice to hear how they're kind of making it their own and adopting it, you know, taking ownership. So that's great. And you talked about the terraces as this great opportunity for learning. And I want to talk to Jason a little bit about the specific challenges with those terraces. You know, I'm sure, especially with the makeup of the cross section, you guys are growing a lot of stuff in there. If you could talk a bit about the challenges there structurally.
Yeah, the goal was to support the areas that had very high loads, in some cases 6 to 8 times what a typical terrace would have, in a way that would be most cost effective. So the challenge was that the loads were not uniform. They were undulating in the same way as the soil mounds. And we also had a lot of trees and different point loads. So changing the framing or the slab system for the entire terrace based on the highest loads was just not economical. And changing the framing or slab system as the loads dictated was also not economical. So there was an opportunity to find that perfect balance between the least material and the least variation in framing. And that was really achieved through careful collaboration with the entire team and turned out very successful. It looks like it's a beautiful space.
That's great. So, you know, speaking about this collaborative process, Tyler, I want to talk a bit about the delivery method for this project. You know, it was a design build, right? I believe. So can you talk a little bit about the delivery method? You know, do you think it was successful? Would you recommend it for other school projects?
Yeah, sure, Janine. Yeah, so it was, we actually seem at risk, but we were brought on at SD early phase design, you know, and obviously it was critical to the key to success of us delivering this job. You know, to APS's credit, they recognized early the potential complexities related to delivering this job on the construction side of things, and realized the value in having the builder in the room early. You know, so that was part one to this, was getting us there early. Another key element of the delivery model was, you know, us being able to bring in our early specialty trade contractors in a design assist procurement method, right? So structural, you know, as Jason mentioned, a lot of the discussions we were having early on, we had our structural design partners there, our subcontractor partners there, curtain wall, mechanical, electrical. And this really allowed the construction team to kind of, like I said, get on early and start to talk about material releases, constructability concerns, and overall construction sequencing related to the tight site. You know, and we'll probably, I'm sure the question will come up later, but around budgeting too, right? It allowed us to kind of have these specialty contractors in the room early, talking to us about the most cost-effective way to put this unique structure together. You know, and with a design as unique and complex as this one, obviously, this is really one of the few delivery methods, and Janine mentioned design build, probably the only other option out there that really would have supported the successful delivery of the job on the construction side of things.
Okay, great. So I kind of want to open up the questions to the audience. We've got a lot of stuff coming through. And, you know, one of the ones I see up at the top, Tyler, if you could talk a bit about those budgetary constraints. We're getting specifically asked, what was the total budget for the project? And did we come in on budget? And was there a cost per student that we could?
So I can speak, I can't speak for our client, obviously. I can speak to the construction costs. I would love to pass the buck to somebody if anybody wants it, but no. So, you know, being involved early, so it's kind of talking to how we trended and how we maintained budget. You know, being on early and working with the team as collaborative as we did at any kind of pre-construction budgeting milestone, whether that was 50% DDs, 50% CDs. You know, anytime we had any kind of trends in the wrong direction, we would bring the team in collaboratively and work through those. So that was really a great success story of how pre-construction collaboration works between a construction team and a design team. You know, happy to say that by the time we got to GMP, we were able to deliver a building that looked like this at our client's budget. So again, just a really great success story. As we went into the construction, really the challenges that we had related to cost and budget were related to unforeseen conditions. You know, Andrew kind of mentioned them early, but, you know, whether it be unsuitable soils or existing utilities or incoming utilities, and kind of working with the authorities to bring those utilities in, that was the bulk of kind of our, you know, our budget and cost challenges that we had during construction. You know, for the most part, the GMP budget related to the design and construction, you know, held as we would typically expect it to, and the standard margin of error for a construction project. So yeah, I think overall the budget was a pretty big success, given the unforeseen things that we were facing on the site. Related to dollar per square foot, I think we landed somewhere between a 450 and a 500 number. I think is probably about where it finaled out. I don't know, Dr. Robinson, if you have a dollar per student. I don't know that I have that one off the top of my head, but maybe nobody does. But yeah, I think in terms of budget, looking at what we were able to deliver and how unique and special it is, I actually think it was a nice success story there.
That's great. So we've got a question from Maury Sanders. Was it intentional from the beginning, from ACPS's perspective, to create a signature building with an internationally renowned architect? So I don't know if Dr. Casey, if you know that answer.
I mean, I think I spoke to that a little bit, that I think, I don't think it was the intention, but I think when Big threw their hat in the ring, I think there was some appeal to that. I mean, in this community, and I can see there are some other Arlingtonians out here, I think there's always been a little bit of back and forth on like whether that was the right fiscal decision for Arlington. But I think both the county board and the school board decided that yes, they were gonna, invest in a building like this. So, and I think largely had community support for that.
Yeah, maybe more broadly, if any of the architects also want to talk about how the team came together early on, the Leo A. Daly, Big, and all the different consultants.
Aran, do you want to take this?
I mean, when we assembled this project team, it was done with a collaboration. We knew that we needed to have a strong local partner on this, and Leo A. Daly was that partner. And then we were relying on a lot of firms that were in the DC area to pull off a project like this. Big has a long history with Silman, so we knew we needed an expertise of a very good structural engineer to do something that was cost effective and also that was going to meet the formal demands that we required. But I think this project is a good example of a wide variety of disciplines coming together, because there's always these issues of how do you package something like this and how do you package it so that it meets the aesthetics, the programmatic, and the financial needs of the job. And I think we made a lot of good compromises based on great input from Gilbane, as well as from all the consultants. Like, we went through many rounds of, we had an initial concept, and then we had to reevaluate those concepts to make them a reality. And it was an enjoyable process, complex, but enjoyable.
Great. So we've got another question from Melissa. Does APS see any special opportunities for COVID-related adaptation of this building versus the more traditionally designed schools throughout the system? So I guess thinking about, the COVID piece.
Not that I can think of offhand, like, we're bringing kids back on Tuesday, so I guess we'll see how we adapt it from there.
Yeah. Perhaps a lot of these outdoor terraces are a good place in the meantime, also for some outdoor learning. So we've got a question from Elizabeth, again, kind of back to budget, but more specifically related to the envelope. So how were you able to meet budgetary constraints with the project, given the increased envelope over a traditional school? Who wants to take
I
that?
can maybe, oh yeah, go for it, Andrew.
So the envelope it's essentially cold for metal framing with more insulation. Both of those items on their own are not more expensive. And most of the glazing in the project is pretty straightforward window wall that spans one level, which is actually very economical. So we were able to come up with something that's very efficient and actually not that much more expensive than a traditional cavity wall type of system.
Yeah, and building on what Andrew's saying, one of the things that's not obvious on the building is that it's actually a brick rain screen. It's not a traditional masonry system. So some of the things that this is again, an interplay between working with Tyler's team at Gilbane and our structural team and with Leo A Daly, is that by doing a rain screen, it's a much lighter system than doing a traditional brick wall. So then those structural loads, those cantilevers can be accounted for. So you don't have to have as heavy steel members. And the building, it was always done in this holistic method of taking savings in one area and then applying it to another. So again, that's something that takes a lot of collaboration between people and not siloing critical information. And having Gilbane on board allowed us to attack those issues and avoid that siloing of costs, because we could save in one area and then put it into another area that has an impact for the public and for the students.
And then maybe one final element of the envelope, which Tyler also kind of briefly touched on, and Andrew as well. We utilize this kind of GMP process and this advanced package process specifically for the curtain wall design process. That goes with the VS1 system, that's the triple height system at Wilson Boulevard, and also all of the glazing at the classroom bars. And we worked very closely with the subcontractor GPR to flag elements that could reduce the overall cost of, let's say, the curtain wall glazing and infrastructure without compromising the design or the aesthetic intent. So things like, just off the top of my head, changing the spacing of between mullions was like a significant cost savings, just going from, like, I think it was 3 feet to 4.5 feet, because that was a more standard module. So those kinds of things, we had this ongoing conversation from schematic design development, and we're kind of working right alongside Gilbane, obviously the entire design team, and then also several of the subcontractors who were going to be building the project.
That's great. So we've got a question from Jeff Luker. So for any of the participants, given the chance to serve a similar program in a setting, what would you do differently? It's kind of lessons learned, maybe. Tyler, you unmuted. You want to answer?
I had a feeling somebody was going to ask me the question. I think for us, really the utilities and the incoming utilities, Andrew talked about it, the coordination of the existing projects surrounding us. It's really not about the program in this specific building, but it's this site and the constraints that were related to, whether it be use permits or coordination with existing or upcoming developments around us, and coordination with the incoming utility contractors that we're bringing work in. I mean, that really, at the early phases of the project, were a challenge for us. And it's something that, we try to get out ahead of, and, it hung on for a while at the beginning of the project. But other than that, I can't think of anything else. I went first, guys, so who's next?
So to add on to that, Tyler, so the way that we delivered or filed for permits, we had a demo permit first, and then we had a foundation to grade permit, and then we had the rest of the building permit. That decision was made a little bit later in the design process, after I think parts of the GMP started to be executed. So I think the earlier that you can make that decision, the easier it's going to go. Obviously, every project is a little bit unique, so you never know. But
okay, great. Anyone else have any kind of lessons learned they'd like to share? Okay, so this is a quick question from Cecilia. Was there a landscape architect on the project? And what was the name of that architect?
Gordon.
There was, yeah.
Yeah, we worked with Gordon, who did the civil and the landscape. They were a great collaborator on this. And they helped us work through the planting depth assemblies. So what Jason was talking about previously about some of the loads from the larger trees that are on the terraces, those we had to carefully engineer what soil depth is required per species of trees. So that was an interesting exercise. I didn't realize all the differences for the root balls on trees until we got into that.
Great. So this is for Dr. Casey. What are the specific spaces on the interior that would help students, that help to support a project-based learning pedagogy to help the students thrive?
So we aren't necessarily like a project-based school. And so, you know, when we first were working with BIG, you know, we talked a lot about like very alternative and different kinds of spaces, like not having classrooms at all, or having like classrooms where there were, you know, it was more like a genius bar kind of approach. You know, we went through a lot of different iterations. And for better or worse, we ended up, you know, we came to that we're still in a place in American education where the classroom is still sort of the center of sort of grounds the building. And so in terms of, you know, spaces, I will say that, and I don't know whether the architects would agree, like one of the challenges in the small space is that we have a really active theater and music program. And so we wanted a large auditorium and really a better like black box theater than we had before. So in terms of like multiple double height spaces, and so I would say those two spaces, you know, while we haven't gotten to use them to the extent that we would like, I think are spaces that have allowed for a lot of collaboration and where there are parts of it that we have more or better than what we had in the past. But, you know, otherwise, I think it's just the spaces that like sort of more of those spaces that were less defined and that kids are figuring out how to define. Like we had a collaboration between our 8th grade science teacher and our physics teacher where all the kids built roller coasters. And obviously those big stairs in the Wilson sort of street atrium provided lots of, you know, like that wasn't something we had ever talked about with the architects, but all of a sudden it was a space filled with 20 different roller coasters that spring. So things like that, I guess.
That's great. So we're getting down to kind of the last couple of minutes. I want to just open it up generally. Do you guys have anything else you'd love to add? I can also ask more questions, but if there's anything else that you want to share. All right. Well, I'm going to ask this one from Eileen. Please describe specific design responses that recognize students with developmental disabilities. I think that's a good one.
I could maybe touch on a few of the programmatic elements, and then I'm sure Casey can expand on it a bit more. Maybe some of the programmatic elements that were incorporated, we have what's called the sensory cottage, which is a location that is used when these students are perhaps having kind of events and need to be in a certain type of environment that kind of is sensorial depriving the students to kind of create a more calm environment. There are multiple classrooms that not only function as teaching spaces in the kind of more typical sense with seats and a teacher's desk, et cetera, but also act as a learning experience for how to cook, how to use a kitchen, how to activate like your bedroom, how to make your bed, kind of like developing a space that is almost as if it's kind of like an apartment or a home, and learning how to kind of live and kind of go through that process. And then there's maybe another kind of unique component is the what's called the auxiliary gym, but it's really a gymnasium that's really devoted to an exercise area that's really devoted specifically to the students from the Eunice Kennedy Shriver program.
Tony, when we're listing all of those distinct programs, I think it's also important to remember that a key component is that students with special needs and just general students all get to interact in the same space. So there's not this like sequestration of people with different abilities. They all get to use the same library. There's the spaces for people to navigate through it if they're in a wheelchair or if they're not. And I think that's one of the key aspects of, you know, when you have distinct programs in a building, you don't want to necessarily separate them because the students are learning from each other and it's a healthy environment for everyone to interact. And that was something that definitely in all of our interviews with programming was very clear direction. Like, this is a universally accessible building, and that's something that we took very seriously. We weren't going to make a space that treats people differently, or that people can't have the same full experience when going through it. So all those terraces are accessible. Yes, we do have distinct spaces for some students, but they all have the same general access throughout the building.
Thank you. So we have hit our time. I want to say thank you so much to every panelist here, because this is such a fascinating project and it really is just inspirational. And I know everyone in the DMV was so excited when it was built. I cannot wait for the students to finally get to use the building and for the whole community. So please keep in touch with us and let us know how that goes. For everyone in the audience that had more questions, I'm so sorry we didn't get to everybody. You could please, still go to our virtual tour website. I put the link there in the chat. You could check out the floor plans, take a look at the site plan, and there's more videos, there's more content. So please continue engaging with this building and drive by. If you're in the area, go drive by and take a look. So with that, thank you so much, everybody. This is recorded. You'll be able to watch it later. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.